Don't leave me here. I'm carrying your son.
Emma's body crashed into the frozen driveway with a painful thud. The icy ground stole the air from her lungs. Her suitcase burst open as baby clothes scattered across the snow. She instinctively wrapped both arms around her 8-month pregnant belly. "My baby!" Snowflakes settled on her tear-covered face. Standing above her was her husband, Richard. His expensive overcoat shielded him from the freezing wind while his eyes remained colder than the winter night. "I told you," Richard said. "This house is no longer your home." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "Richard," her voice trembled. "Please, it's below freezing. Our baby." Richard didn't even look at her stomach. Instead, he grabbed the last suitcase from the doorway and threw it into the snow. The lock burst open. Tiny baby shoes, a knitted blanket, and ultrasound photos scattered across the white ground. Emma gasped. She crawled through the snow, desperately trying to gather the pictures before the wind carried them away. Behind Richard, a beautiful blonde woman stepped out of the mansion wearing a luxurious fur coat. She wrapped her arms around Richard's waist. "You should have thrown her out weeks ago." She looked down at Emma and laughed. "Look at her. She's pathetic." Emma slowly stood. Every movement sent sharp pain through her back. "Claire, I've never done anything to you." Claire smirked. "You existed, and that was enough." Richard slipped his arm around Claire. "I've filed the divorce papers." Emma froze. "What?" "They'll be delivered tomorrow." Her lips trembled. "I'm carrying your son." Richard shrugged. "I'll pay child support." Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Is that all our family means to you?" Richard smiled coldly. "I already have the family I want." Claire rested her head on his shoulder. Emma felt her heart shatter. 7 years of marriage. Gone. Just like that. The front door slowly opened again. An elderly housekeeper hurried outside. She carried a thick winter blanket. "Sir." She looked at Richard with pleading eyes. "Please. Mrs. Emma can't stay outside. She's pregnant." Richard snatched the blanket from her hands. Without hesitation, he threw it into the fireplace just inside the front door. The flames swallowed it instantly. Emma covered her mouth in shock. Richard looked directly into her eyes. "If she survives the night, she can keep the baby. If she doesn't," he shrugged, "I'll start over." The old housekeeper gasped. "Sir." Claire burst into laughter. "Finally. Now you're acting like a real man." Emma felt dizzy. Was this really the same man who once stayed awake all night just because she had a headache? The same man who promised, "I'll protect you forever." She looked at him one last time. "I loved you." Richard's face didn't change. "I know." Then, he slammed the mansion door shut. The sound echoed across the empty estate. Emma stood alone. Snow continued falling. The temperature kept dropping. Her fingers had already gone numb. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself. It did almost nothing. She picked up the ultrasound photos with shaking hands. One picture showed the tiny outline of her unborn son. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried." Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her stomach. Emma cried out. She dropped to one knee. "No, not now. Please, not now." She reached for her phone. The screen was cracked from a fall. Battery, 1%. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped it. She dialed Richard. Inside the mansion, the phone rang. Richard looked at the screen. "Emma." Claire smiled. "Answer it." Richard pressed the decline button. Then, he switched the phone off. Emma stared at her own screen. Call failed. A second contraction hit. Harder. She screamed. The sound disappeared into the snowstorm. No one came. Minutes passed. Emma's vision blurred. She struggled to stay awake. Then, far down the private road, she noticed 2 bright lights cutting through the storm. At first, she thought they were ordinary headlights. But they weren't. 1 vehicle became 2. 2 became 6. 6 became 12. An entire convoy of dark military SUVs slowly approached the mansion. Emma blinked. Maybe she was hallucinating. The convoy stopped directly in front of the estate. Every vehicle shut off its engine at the exact same moment. Then, the doors opened. Soldiers in full dress uniforms stepped out one after another. Their movements were perfectly synchronized. Finally, an elderly four-star general emerged from the lead vehicle. His medals shimmered beneath the falling snow. One young officer rushed toward him. "Sir, the woman is over there." The general looked toward Emma. The moment he saw her lying in the snow, his face changed. His jaw tightened. His hands began to shake. "No," he whispered. "Dear God." He immediately ran toward her. Every soldier followed. Emma could barely keep her eyes open. She watched the old general kneel beside her, his eyes filled with tears. Then, to the complete shock of every soldier, the general removed his cap, placed it against his chest, and saluted the freezing pregnant woman. His voice broke as he spoke. "Welcome home, Mom." The entire convoy stood frozen. Snow continued falling around them, but not a single soldier moved. The four-star general remained in his salute, his eyes filled with tears as he looked at Emma's pale face. The young captain beside him whispered nervously, "Sir, should we call the ambulance?" The general turned sharply. "Now!" His voice echoed across the estate. Within seconds, two military medics rushed from one of the armored vehicles carrying emergency equipment. Emma's breathing had become shallow. One medic knelt beside her. Blood pressure is dropping. Another checked her pulse. She's showing signs of hypothermia. The general removed his thick military overcoat without hesitation and wrapped it around Emma's trembling body. His hand shook. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry we found you this late." Emma looked at him through half-closed eyes. "I don't know you." The old general smiled sadly. "No, you don't. But I made a promise to someone who loved you more than life itself." Before Emma could ask what he meant, another sharp pain shot through her stomach. She cried out. The medic looked up immediately. "Sir, she's in premature labor." The general's face turned pale. "Get the helicopter ready." Immediately. Meanwhile, inside the war mansion, Claire poured herself another glass of expensive champagne. She smiled as soft music played through the living room. Finally, she sighed. "Our house." Richard stood by the fireplace watching the snowstorm outside. Something felt wrong. He couldn't explain it. He kept thinking about Emma. He shook the thought away. Claire walked over and kissed him. "Forget her." Richard forced a smile. "You're right." Then, a loud knock echoed through the mansion. Boom! 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 Claire frowned. Who would come here in this weather? Richard opened the front door. His confident expression disappeared instantly. Standing outside were nearly 50 soldiers. Behind them, military police. Armurat vehículos. A helicopter hovered above the estate. Its powerful spotlight illuminated the mansion like daylight. Richard swallowed hard. What is this? The general slowly walked toward him. Every step was calm, controlled, terrifying. Richard forced a nervous laugh. "General, it's an honor." The general stopped inches away from him. His eyes were ice cold. "Are you Richard Lawson?" "Igriegagis." Without another word, the general removed a white glove from his right hand. Slap! The sound echoed through the snowy night. Richard stumbled backward, clutching his face. Claire screamed. The soldiers remained perfectly still. The general leaned forward. His voice was barely above a whisper. "That was from Father." Richard stared in disbelief. What? Before he could recover, the general grabbed him by the collar. "And this," his eyes burned with fury, "is from a soldier who has spent 40 years protecting innocent people." He threw Richard against the stone wall of the mansion. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. Claire ran toward them. "Stop! You can't do this!" A female military officer blocked her path. "Stand back." Claire pointed angrily. "Do you know who we are?" The officer smiled. "We do, and that's exactly why we're here." Richard struggled to stand. "You've made a terrible mistake." The general looked toward the mansion. "Did you force your pregnant wife into the snow?" Richard hesitated. "It wasn't like that." "Answer me." "Yes." "Did you deny her shelter?" Richard looked down. "Yes." "Did you refuse to help when she begged you?" Silence. The general's voice thundered. "I asked you a question." Richard flinched. "Yes." Every soldier's face hardened. The general slowly closed his eyes. For several seconds, no one spoke. When he opened them again, there were tears in them. "You have no idea," he whispered. "What you've done." Richard frowned. "What do you mean?" The general reached into his uniform. He removed an old photograph protected inside a leather case. He handed it to Richard. Richard looked at it. His eyes widened. The photograph showed a young woman wearing military dress uniform. Standing beside her was a little girl. The little girl looked exactly like Emma. Richard stared at the picture. "What is this?" The general smiled sadly. "The bravest soldier I ever commanded." He pointed toward the woman in uniform. "Colonel Emma Bennett." He then pointed toward the little girl. "And her daughter, Emma." Richard's hands began to shake. I don't understand." "You will." The general carefully took the photograph back. 22 years ago, your wife lost both of her parents while they were serving this country. The government placed her identity under military protection because of what her parents died protecting. Claire laughed nervously. "That sounds ridiculous." The general slowly turned toward her. "It isn't." He nodded toward one of the officers. The officer opened a secure briefcase. Inside were classified military files stamped "Top Secret." The general looked directly into Richard's terrified eyes. "You believed you married an ordinary woman." He paused. "You were wrong." A black luxury sedan suddenly entered the estate. Every soldier immediately stood at attention. The general saluted. Richard turned toward the arriving vehicle. His heartbeat quickened. The rear door opened. A tall, silver-haired woman stepped out wearing a dark coat with a small flag pin on the lapel. The general lowered his voice. "She's here." Richard frowned. "Ooh." The general looked at him with pity. The only person with the authority to tell Emma the truth. The woman began walking toward the ambulance. The medics immediately stepped aside. She looked down at Emma with tears in her eyes. Then she whispered words that made the general bow his head. "Forgive me, Princess." Snow continued falling as the mysterious woman hurried toward the ambulance. Every soldier stepped aside without being asked. Even the four-star general lowered his head respectfully. Richard noticed it immediately. Whoever this woman was, she outranked everyone. The woman knelt beside Emma. With trembling fingers, she gently brushed the snow from Emma's face. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "My sweet girl," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Emma slowly opened her eyes. Everything around her looked blurry. The flashing ambulance lights, the soldiers, the snow. She struggled to focus on the woman's face. Her lips trembled. "Do I know you?" The woman smiled sadly. "No, but I've known you since the day you were born." Emma frowned. "What?" The general quietly looked away. He had hoped this conversation would happen under happier circumstances. The woman gently squeezed Emma's hand. "My name is Eleanor Ashford. I served beside your parents." Emma tried to sit up. A sharp pain stopped her. "My parents died." "I know." Eleanor nodded. "But before they died, they entrusted someone with protecting you." Emma looked confused. "Ooh." Eleanor closed her eyes. "Me?" Back at the mansion, Richard stood frozen. His face had gone completely pale. Claire grabbed his arm. "Richard, this has to be fake." Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind kept replaying the general salute. Military officers didn't salute ordinary civilians. Something wasn't adding up. One of the soldiers approached. "Sir." The general nodded. "What is it?" "We found something." The soldier handed him a small silver necklace. The general immediately recognized it. His eyes widened. He walked back toward Emma. Carefully, he opened the locket. Inside was an old photograph. A young military couple, holding a little baby. The general smiled through tears. "She still has it." Emma looked at the necklace. "I've worn that since I was a child. My grandmother gave it to me." The general nodded. "She was following your mother's final wish." Emma stared at him. "My mother's final wish?" The general took a slow breath. "The night your parents died, they weren't killed in an ordinary military mission." The entire convoy became silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Richard unconsciously stepped closer. He wanted to hear every word. The general continued. "They were protecting something." Claire rolled her eyes. "Oh, please." "What?" Secret military treasure? No one laughed. The general looked directly at her. It wasn't treasure. It was a little girl. He looked back at Emma. You. Emma's heartbeat quickened. I don't understand. Eleanor took over. 26 years ago, your parents uncovered a criminal network operating inside the government. They gathered enough evidence to expose them. But before they could testify, they were betrayed. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. They knew they were going to die, so they asked us to promise one thing. She gently touched Emma's cheek. Protect our daughter. Emma whispered, my grandmother never told me any of this. She couldn't. It would have put your life in danger. Richard felt sick. He had spent 7 years married to a woman whose entire identity had been hidden for her own safety. Then another realization hit him. Emma had never lied. She simply never knew. Suddenly, a black armored SUV sped through the estate gates. Its tires sprayed snow everywhere. The vehicle stopped beside the convoy. The driver's door opened. A young military intelligence officer jumped out. He ran toward the general. Sir, he saluted sharply. We have a problem. The general frowned. What happened? The officer handed him a tablet. We've confirmed it. The people responsible for Colonel Sarah Bennett's death have been released. The general's expression darkened. When? This morning. Eleanor closed her eyes. Oh no. The officer looked toward Emma. They know she's alive. Silence. Richard looked from one face to another. What are you talking about? The officer swallowed. They've already sent people. Claire laughed nervously. Sent people where? The officer slowly turned toward the dark forest surrounding the mansion. Here, at that exact moment, every soldier reached for their weapons. One sniper shouted from the rooftop. Movement! Another yelled. 3 vehicles approaching from the north. The general stepped in front of Emma's stretcher. His voice thundered across the estate. Protect Miss Bennett. No matter what. Then, gunshots exploded through the snowy night. Bang! A bullet shattered one of the convoy's headlights. Guests inside the mansion screamed. Soldiers immediately formed a protective circle around Emma. Richard instinctively threw himself to the ground. Claire shrieked in terror. The general looked toward the darkness. His jaw tightened. They found her. He slowly drew his service pistol. After 26 years, they finally found her. The general slowly lowered his pistol. The soldiers relaxed. The approaching vehicles were not enemies. 3 black luxury sedans rolled through the mansion gates. Each one carried members of the National Veterans Council and the Ministry of Defense. As the doors opened, men and women wearing military decorations stepped out. The moment they saw Emma lying on the stretcher, every one of them saluted. Richard couldn't believe what he was seeing. What is happening? One elderly officer walked toward him. His eyes burned with disappointment. For 26 years, we searched for Colonel Sarah Bennett's daughter. He pointed toward Emma. And all this time, she was living under your roof. Richard looked at Emma. His voice trembled. You never told me. Emma looked at him through tears. I couldn't tell you something I didn't know. Those words pierced Richard's heart. For 7 years, he had accused her of hiding things from him. Yet the greatest secret of her life had been hidden from her too. The general stepped forward. He held the silver locket in his hand. Emma, there is something your parents left for you. He carefully opened the locket again. This time, he pressed a hidden latch. Click! A tiny compartment opened. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Emma gasped. My grandmother never knew. The general unfolded it carefully. The paper had yellowed with age. He smiled softly. It's your mother's handwriting. Emma's tears began falling before he even read the first line. The general cleared his throat, then read aloud. To my precious Emma, if you're hearing this, it means your father and I couldn't come home. The ballroom-like silence that settled over the snowy estate was overwhelming. Even the wind seemed to stop. The general continued. Please don't grow up hating the world because of what happened to us. Kindness is never weakness. Protect the innocent. Forgive when it hurts. And never allow another person's cruelty to change the goodness inside your heart. Emma sobbed uncontrollably. She covered her mouth with trembling hands. The general struggled to continue. His own voice cracked. One day, Someone will try to convince you that you are worthless. Don't believe them. You are the greatest gift God ever gave us. By now, there wasn't a dry eye among the soldiers. Several quietly wiped tears from their faces. Even the paramedic standing beside the stretcher turned away to compose herself. Richard collapsed to his knees. Everything his mother-in-law had written described Emma perfectly. Kind, patient, loyal, the very qualities he had mocked. He buried his face in his hands. What have I done? Claire, however, folded her arms. Oh, please. It's just an old letter. Every head turned toward her. The general slowly walked over. His expression was calm, almost too calm. Miss Claire, you've mistaken kindness for weakness all night. He pointed toward Emma. That woman could destroy your future with a single signature. But she hasn't. He stepped closer. Do you know why? Claire didn't answer. Because she was raised by heroes. Silence. Mr. Lawson's elderly housekeeper slowly walked toward Emma. Tears streamed down her face. She gently held Emma's hand. I'm sorry. Emma looked up. You don't have to apologize. Yes. The old woman whispered. I should have protected you. Emma smiled weakly. You were the only person who tried. The old woman broke down crying. Richard watched the exchange. He suddenly remembered every moment. The nights Emma stayed awake waiting for him. The homemade lunches she packed. The birthday surprises. The handwritten notes she left in his briefcase. The countless sacrifices she had made without asking for anything in return. He had traded all of that for someone who disappeared the moment his power was threatened. At that moment, Claire quietly reached in her handbag. She pulled out the diamond engagement ring Richard had given her. She looked at it, then looked at Richard. Without saying a single word, she tossed the ring into the snow. I don't date broke men. She turned and walked toward the gate. Richard didn't stop her. He couldn't. He finally understood. Emma had loved him when he had nothing. Claire loved him only while he had everything. There was a world of difference. The ambulance doors opened. The lead medic approached the general. Sir, the baby's heartbeat is becoming unstable. Emma instinctively placed both hands over her stomach. Fear flooded her face. The general gently squeezed her shoulder. Don't worry. You won't face this alone again. He looked toward the helicopter waiting nearby. Let's get my daughter to the hospital. For the first time since the nightmare began, Emma allowed herself to believe those words. She wasn't alone anymore. As the stretcher was carefully lifted into the helicopter, Richard took one hesitant step forward. Emma. She turned. He could barely meet her eyes. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. She remained silent. But if you ever need anything, our child, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become the father I should have been. Emma looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke softly. I hope you do. Not for me. For our son. Those were the last words she said before the helicopter doors closed. The rotors began to spin. Snow swirled into the air. Richard stood alone in the driveway as the helicopter disappeared into the night sky. He had spent years building a mansion, but in one evening, he had lost the only home that truly mattered. The military helicopter landed on the roof of St. Andrew's Medical Center. Doctors and nurses were already waiting. As soon as the doors opened, Emma was rushed into the operating room. The general never left her side. Neither did Eleanor. Richard arrived 20 minutes later. His expensive clothes were still covered in snow. He stopped outside the operating room. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for his business, not for his reputation, not for his wealth, only for Emma and the child he had almost abandoned. Hours passed. The hospital corridor was silent. The general sat with his head lowered. In his hands was the old silver locket. He whispered quietly, Sarah, I promised I'd bring her home. Please don't take her from us now. The operating room doors suddenly opened. Every person stood. The doctor removed his mask and smiled. Congratulations. The mother is safe. A sigh of relief swept through the corridor. And the doctor smiled even wider. You have a healthy baby boy. The general closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his face. Thank you, Lord. Richard leaned against the wall. His legs almost gave out. His son was alive. A few minutes later, A nurse carried out the tiny baby wrapped in a soft blue blanket. The general carefully reached out. "May I?" The nurse nodded. He held the baby as though he were holding the most precious treasure in the world. The little boy wrapped his tiny fingers around the general's thumb. The old soldier smiled. "You have your mother's eyes." Richard watched from a distance. He wanted to step closer, but guilt held him back. The general noticed. He looked at Richard for a long moment, then slowly walked toward him. Richard lowered his head. "I don't deserve to hold him." The general didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gently placed the baby into Richard's trembling arms. Richard gasped. His voice broke. The little boy opened his eyes. For the first time, father and son looked at each other. Richard burst into tears. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." The general placed a firm hand on Richard's shoulder. "Listen to me carefully." Richard looked up. "You failed as a husband. You failed as a protector. But your son has done nothing wrong." He looked at the sleeping baby. "Don't make him pay for your mistakes." Richard nodded through tears. "I won't. I swear." At that moment, the nurse smiled. "She's awake." Everyone turned toward Emma's room. The general entered first. Emma was exhausted, but when she saw the baby, her face lit up with the most beautiful smile. The nurse carefully placed her son into her arms. Emma kissed his forehead. "Hello, my little miracle." The baby yawned. The room filled with quiet laughter. The general stood beside the bed. "I've spent 26 years trying to keep a promise." He gently held Emma's hand. "Today, I can finally tell your parents I didn't fail them." Emma looked at him with tears in her eyes. "No," she smiled. "You became the father they prayed I would have." The general couldn't hold back his emotions. He embraced Emma gently. Neither of them spoke. Words were no longer necessary. A few moments later, Richard quietly knocked on the open door. He remained standing at the entrance. He didn't dare step inside. Emma looked at him. Neither anger nor hatred remained in her eyes. Only peace. Richard swallowed hard. "I know I have no right to ask, but may I meet my son?" Emma looked down at the baby sleeping peacefully, then back at Richard. "You may meet him." Richard's eyes filled with hope. "But," Emma continued, "you cannot meet him as the man who threw his mother into the snow." Silence. "You'll meet him. When you become a man, he can be proud to call his father." Richard nodded. He understood. This wasn't punishment. It was an opportunity, one he would have to earn. He quietly walked away, not defeated, but determined to change. 1 year later, the city gathered for the grand opening of the Colonel Sarah Bennett Foundation, created to support military families, widows, and children of fallen service members. Reporters crowded outside. Cameras flashed everywhere. Emma stepped onto the stage, carrying her 1-year-old son. Beside her stood the general. The crowd erupted into applause. The mayor smiled. "Today we honor not only 2 heroes who gave their lives for this nation." He looked toward Emma, but also the daughter who continues their legacy. The ribbon was cut. The crowd cheered. Across the street, Richard watched quietly from a distance. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit anymore. He had sold the mansion, left his executive position, and spent the past year volunteering at shelters for veterans and homeless families. Not because anyone asked him to, because he needed to become someone different. He smiled as he watched his son laugh in Emma's arms. He didn't interrupt. He didn't expect recognition. He simply whispered, "I'm keeping my promise." The general noticed him standing in the crowd. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then, the general gave a single nod. Not of approval. Not yet, but of acknowledgement. It was the first step. Emma saw it too. She looked toward Richard, then gently kissed her son's forehead. Life had not returned what she lost. It had given her something greater. The strength to let go of bitterness. The courage to embrace a new beginning. And the wisdom to understand that true justice isn't watching someone fall. It's refusing to let their actions steal your peace. The camera slowly pulled away. Snow began to fall once more. But this time, it no longer felt cold. Because where there had once been abandonment, there was now hope.